Hello, 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 everyone. Welcome to the Enquiry. Today, Lisa, Jess, and I have the privilege to hosting Caitlin MacGregor, the CEO and co-founder of Plum.io, right? Caitlin is a visionary leader who has transformed Plum from a pre-employment assessment solution into a robust talent management platform, revolutionizing how enterprises manage their talent across the employee cycle. Our passion lies in equipping businesses and particularly business leaders with the talent data they need to match their talent to the right roles. So today, Caitlin is joining us to share insight on how we can use also these type of capabilities to activate one's authentic identity and setting new standards in identity activations and employee talent acquisition. So let's dive in. Welcome, Caitlin, to the Enquiry. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
So my first question is very simple, actually, Caitlin. Could you share the story of how Plum came to be?
So I started 2 businesses for other people before starting my own. And it was at the second business, which was an educational writing software solution for students with learning disabilities. I was hired as the US president to go down to New Hampshire, start up the US branch. And I went to make my first hire. And my executive coach said that if I screwed that up, it'd be a loss of $300,000 on the business. So, not wanting to make that mistake, I ended up using a psychometric assessment that my executive coach had designed while he was teaching at Harvard to generate extra income. And I was blown away because we used it on every single person, and 2 people stood out for different reasons. One was perfect on paper. He was the golden boy by every measure. He had 5 years of relevant work experience, master's education. But the assessment showed he had a mediocre work ethic. But my CEO back in Canada was so excited. He's the perfect match. He was hired anyway. And then I had this other person, and she scored in the top 3% of the workforce for overall productivity. And my executive coach said she was 1 in 1,000. I'd be an idiot not to hire her. So I ran an experiment and hired the perfect person on paper and the person with the highest assessment scores. 3 months later, the guy's fantasy football team was doing really well, but he was only doing 10% of his work. And the woman was doing all of his work plus hers. And within a year and a half, she had replaced me as acting president while I went on maternity leave. And the punchline is she had 2 art degrees. Her only work experience had been 7 years of waitressing, and she didn't even know how to use Excel. So if I had relied on a traditional resume, there's no way I would have interviewed her, let alone hired her. And this kept happening for the next almost 3 years. Every single person that was at the top of the list that we ended up hiring, we just was this amazing diamond in the rough that we never would have seen if it wasn't for this data. So I started Plum because I wanted to democratize access to this highly predictive data. I wanted to take it out of the hands of the consultants that really made it limited to high-level executive roles or high-volume, roles. I really wanted to disrupt this pattern matching of keywords. Even today with ChatGPT, it's one bot against the next. I really wanted to have data that's 4 times more accurate at predicting on-the-job success and put it in the hands of every single person so that they could be matched to jobs that'll make them happy, fulfilled, and thrive.
Yeah, and I love that, Caitlin. And Jess, so it's such an interesting intersect there between what we're doing in authentic identity and how we glean those data and patterns. And Jess, you've done so much work in personal branding. Like, how do you see that story connecting into what we're trying to do in authentic identity?
Well, I think what Caitlin is speaking to is so important because when you try to box data, when you try to format it in this really homogenized way, you lose the story, you lose the narrative. And so a lot of times that's going to happen to you because you're dealing with systems and processes that are in place. And, it's like, fill it in here, put it in here, it gets reformatted, spit out over here. But where you have a little bit of control and autonomy are in places where you're inputting it. So you have your bio that you put on LinkedIn, you have your bio that you put on other social media. I encourage every single person, I will never say this enough, whatever your name is, first and last name, please own the URL for your name. And if you can't get the exact one, get something really similar or get it specific to your region or your industry and the dot, because when people are vetting you and they're researching you and they're looking into you, and if you want them to look beyond these little boxes of information that are really homogenized and find the true story of who you are and what your perspective is and your point of differentiation, your own website that just says what you want to say is so powerful and also so easy and cheap, almost free to create, but people don't take advantage of it. So I totally agree with her assessment that when we try to treat human beings like data points, we miss out on so much of the complexity of who they are and how their story and how their background has influenced their ability to make decisions, to lead, to innovate, to create. And so as the person that wants that opportunity, you also need to kind of take the reins and find the platforms and the places where you can speak and talk about your own story articulately, concisely. And I'll be concise and I'll stop.
I love that. I love that. And Caitlin, like, I've had the experience of working with you in a corporate role. And now as we kind of, usher in authentic identity, and one of the, I'd say, shared passions that you and I have is like pattern recognition. And I'm always looking for the outliers. I'm always looking for the signals that aren't obvious, in a way that I really seek to be open to beyond just a hunch, but like, what is that signal? And I find it fascinating that you started with almost this like $300,000, like if I make a mistake, it's too big to fail. But you use that to go beyond what I would say a traditional linear thinker would be, which is like, we joke like the safe hire, the safe software choice, the safe this, the safe bet. The safe bet would have actually, in your situation, perhaps led to a failure of a decision. How did you go beyond that? Like, nobody gets fired for hiring the person on paper. How did you use that to fuel you to democratize this? Because I think that's a fascinating underpinning in your story.
I think it's because that was my exposure to industrial organizational psychology. It was, I got to see in real life what the psychology of work means. And I was blown away that things like where you went to school or even having a university degree, it doesn't actually predict on the job performance. We are constantly told that past, is a good indication of future. That's actually not the case when it comes to work experience. And, learning about human behavior where we're trying to de-risk our decisions and trying to not make a mistake, we default to what we know. And it's really a false sense of security, and it just perpetuates bias. And so I started understanding that if you want to understand what makes somebody come to work and outperform their peers, and what makes somebody stay in the job the longest, it actually comes down to, are they aligned to the behaviors that are needed in the role? We all talk about KPIs and key performance indicators. We all know that this is best practice of what do you want somebody to accomplish, a year from now? Well, if you think about your own, history of hiring and unfortunately letting people go, the vast majority of people are fired, or let go, not because they didn't have the hard skills or the experience to do the job. The vast majority of time, people are let go because they aren't a behavioral fit. They aren't able to perform from the type of behaviors that are needed in the role. So it really starts with, what are those key behavioral indicators? Key behavioral indicators. What are the KBIs? We like to say that the KBIs are the new KPIs. That what are those key behavioral indicators that predict success? And when I started seeing that there was science behind this, that it was actually about measuring the behaviors needed for the role, it was actually measuring the behaviors of the human, and that this data, again, is 4 times more accurate than a resume, for me, it was like, what in the world is the working world doing? Like, this is the most important thing that adults do in their lives, is the job that they are in. It takes up the most time. It has the most influence in our lives. And we've got it completely backwards. And I got to see firsthand how broken the system is. And I just, now 11 years later, the thing that keeps me going is that I've got 2 kids. And when they enter the workforce, I don't care if they're doctors or lawyers or teachers or nurses. I want them to find a job that makes them happy, fulfilled, and thrive. The system is not set up to help them navigate their careers where the first question is, what's going to get you out of bed in the morning excited about the work that you're going to do? At the end of the day, what's going to make you high five your best friend or your partner or your family and say, I had a killer day? It's not that you did this one task. It's that if you're really innovative, you got to come up with an out of the box idea and do something different than the week before. If you are somebody who's very process driven, it's that you got to create a process for your organization that now lots of people are going to have a better experience because they're using your process. And that was completely missing in the working world. And it was too big of a problem not to say, hey, I know that there's real science behind this, but unfortunately, the PhDs in IO psychology, they don't know how to turn it into software. They don't know how to get out of their own way. They're not invested in democratizing access to it. They want to stay up in their ivory towers and make this exclusive and make it require a decoder ring. So I knew that this problem had to be solved by somebody who really could understand how technology could allow this to scale and truly transform how we put people into roles so that they can flourish. And as a result, businesses will thrive.
Yeah, that's so true, actually, Caitlin. And whilst you are talking, I'm just thinking about my career in insurance, 25 years. And, the CV, we need to all have a great CV. But then when you're actually being analyzed and evaluated, the metrics tend to fit into, let's say, financially driven environment and potentially a very male-driven environment. And even though I'm very proud to be French and like my fashion, sometimes we have to emulate and become other people. And I think what you said about the CV, right? You need to move away from the CV and identify people who have the right competency and the right behavior for your culture is critical. And you know what? I'm very proud this past year, I've met amazing talent executives who actually started implementing that as part of their strategy. They said, Sabine, we don't actually look at the CV anymore. We actually look at the values, the beliefs. We look at people's and their passion first before, the great educational background they may have. So I want to move into activating your identity, your authentic identity. Jess, what is our next question for Caitlin?
So Caitlin, our next question is, how does Plum go beyond a traditional online personality profile? And by the way, you guys, we've all experienced this profile process, and it was pretty amazing. But we'd love for you to give us anecdotally some examples of how you guys do what you do.
Yeah. So the first thing is most assessments have been designed really with the best interest of the company at heart first. And we design this first and foremost to benefit the individual, because we have 93% of people that are asked to complete their Plum profile do because they get so much in return. It's a real ROI for the individual. It's about serving them first so that they want to participate in it. It's a positive experience. We work with companies like Whirlpool and Citibank where, they're probably going to only accept 1% of the people that apply to their company. And those 99 that don't get the job, they still want them to go out and buy a Whirlpool appliance or sign up for a credit card. And so having that fantastic experience for the individual is so critical to really the foundational part of how we differentiate. And so it's an online assessment that you take once in your career. You can come back and take it once a year if you want, but those things that get you out of bed in the morning or really drain you at the end of the day, those really don't change after you're about 22 years old. Those things that if you love innovation when you're young, you're still going to love innovation 20 years later. And so this 25 minute untimed assessment is really like your LinkedIn profile. It's not about what you've done historically. It's about what you could do if given the opportunity. And it goes with you. You own it as an individual. The company doesn't own it. And it goes with you throughout your career. And if you go and apply to Citibank and then you go and apply to Manulife or to Intact Insurance, you don't have to retake the assessment. You're able to have it come with you. So the first thing is how it was designed with the individual in mind. The second thing is that it's very holistic. So we're looking at, the gold standard of personality in terms of, what's most like you, least like you, really getting to the heart of those things that you prioritize. And in an ideal world, you delegate to somebody else if you could. And then it gets into things like problem solving, not, language or math or what you've learned in school. It's more about how do you solve brand new net problems, because that's what the working world is. It's something you've never encountered. How successful are you at figuring it out? And then social intelligence, which is like EQ, but more scientific. How are you at resolving people problems? And then you get your own profile that talks about, again, what drives you and gets you out of bed in the morning and energizes you, and what drains you and could lead to burnout. And we're assessing 10 talents like innovation, communication, execution, teamwork, and giving you a common language that's very intuitive to describe yourself. And what I find so fascinating is some of the things that come most easily to us are the things that make us truly unique and allow us to outperform from our peers. But because it comes so easily, we often as individuals don't promote that that's the amazing thing about us because it's so easy. Why would I talk about it? And we don't recognize that's the stuff that actually is our DNA as workers that make us so exceptional. So it gives you this objective data to help you frame what makes you exceptional. And if you are able to have a job that taps into that, you're going to outperform your peers, and it's not even going to feel like work. You're going to actually enjoy it.
Lisa, Jess, I love that statement because for me, it feels like a gift. The one of the principles of Cialdini, right? The power of influencing requires for us to give to other people. And that sounds like an amazing gift to give a talent, applying to our organization, the ability to really own on who they are and who they might be, and who they can help as well in the future. As you are speaking, Caitlin, I can actually think about even the startup world I'm working with all the time, and the corporates I'm working with all the time as well. And that could be a really nice gift as part of a programming. It could be a really nice gift as well for employees, talent trying to join the industry, because we have a big problem in insurance, right, Lisa and Jess? We have a talent gap and we are going through talent war.
Yeah, and Sabine, connecting to that, and like I've been beaming the whole time you've been talking, Caitlin, because I'm connecting all the threads from how you created Plum and really what we're seeing going on right now, like in the world in terms of like emphasizing your superpowers, your strengths. And of course, Susie Welsh wrote a book and has co-curriculated a curriculum at NYU Howard Stern connected to her book on Becoming You. And the emphasis that the course has, which connects actually to what we're doing in authentic identity, is the Venn diagram, if you will, of your passions, your behavior, these innate behavioral indicators, right? How you monetize that. And I would say clearly it's beyond skills, and I think a lot of times I would say even in self-reflection, it sounds so easy to just say like, what are your energizers? What are your key behavioral traits? And you're like, I just know these and I'm going to find this intersection. Well, I'm here to say, if it were that easy, we wouldn't get to, and I'll use myself, I just turned 50. We wouldn't get to this point in our life where we're like, what is that? And Susie actually documents that as well. She got to this point in her life and she's like, what is this? So I think having data that goes underneath that and calls out what are those key behavioral indicators that you may or may not have advanced your skill sets in. And Caitlin, I remember when I was very young in my career, I was very frustrated by this coach that it doesn't matter. The coach wanted me to do this, that, and the other. And I'll use tennis as an example. The coach wanted me to become a volley tennis player. And I'm like, but my skill set, my key behavioral indicator, had I had words like that, Caitlin, is I'm an ace. I don't get into the volley. Like I ace the serve. I don't play the volley because I'm not a volley player. And that coach was so I'll say annoyed with me. And I was like, but you don't understand. Here I am trying to like educate the coach. I'm like, but you don't understand. I need to be able to volley, but my goal is to not get drawn into the volley. My goal is to ace. And I'm not saying ace the serve. I'm not saying you don't work on what I was telling that coach like 20 years ago was, my key behavioral indicator is the ace. My goal is to avoid the volley. Help me. And back in those days, coaches didn't know how to help you. So I think it's really interesting to think of leveraging the Plum personality profile to know anecdotally where are you an ace. And so I love that you created that for us all. And maybe over to you, Jess, to like round this segment down. I think that's so interesting in how we connect that to authentic identity.
So yeah, I mean, I think that what we've been saying for a bit is we have a tendency to want to organize things as humans, and so we like to take the surface, like shallow information, quickly like categorize and compartmentalize everyone, and then just move on to the next task. And what you've been doing with Plum and what we're doing with authentic identity is diving a lot deeper. But where I think, and I hope we're going with this, is to start to talk about, well, diving deeper takes a lot of time. Diving deeper is nuanced. It's not light touch. It requires a lot of humanity and insight, but also because things are moving really quickly and we're innovating and we're pivoting, we don't always have time to we cannot go sit on the therapist's couch for an hour a day and like work on this and then go back to work. So I think where we're going is there's got to be some middle ground, but I love that you've really identified what the problem is and you've created a hybridized tool that addresses that. I think that we're all going to benefit from it a lot.
I love that. So now my favorite part of this, Caitlin, is that this is not hype. It's not hyperbole. You actually baked in, I always refer to you as democratizing industrial psychology. I would give you the crown for that, Caitlin, in my like authentic identity of you. Like from the first moment I met you, I was like, oh my gosh, how did she do that? How did she take something that was reserved for the elite of the elite of the elites and actually make that, like democratized, available, scalable, etc. But there's deep science behind it. So as we think about applying industrial psychology to owning one's authentic identity, what benefits do you think leaders at all levels? Because I think sometimes we think this is for like younger people, like leaders at all levels, like Susie Welsh taking this, right? What benefits do you think they can ascertain from having a Plum profile? And what are hurdles with other, I'll say past approaches, right? Because we've got to overcome the baggage of past approaches too. So over to you, Caitlin. Love to hear how you're tackling that at Plum.
There's so many different ways to benefit from this. The first one is just having clear data that articulates what is it that's giving you energy and what is it that is draining you, and really doing a quick evaluation of, hey, at the end of every day, at the end of every week, at the end of every month and quarter, like, am I feeling excited and fulfilled, or am I hitting burnout? Because if you're hitting burnout, it's because you're using those behaviors on a daily basis that are really draining for you. And the longer we are in a career, the more we can develop those compensatory coping strategies. But if you're using coping strategies 80% of your day, you're still going to feel burnt out at the end of the day. It's not about if you can or can't do something. It's about, is that the best use of your time? Is that really, if you are, if you have this incredible gift, are you wasting that because you're so busy on something else that's just not the best use of your time, that really should be delegated to somebody else? And so, it's first a quick diagnosis on yourself and really giving you the data and the words and the understanding of what's driving you, energizing you, and what's draining you. And then because you have that data, because you have that insight, you're now in a place to be able to advocate for yourself better. The other thing that happens a lot is early in our career and late in our career, we have these moments where people see potential in us and they give us an opportunity that maybe on paper, it wouldn't have necessarily made sense. So this happens a lot when people are like, how did you get to the job you have today? And you're like, well, I didn't go to school for this. I didn't have experience with it. But in my 20s, somebody saw something in me and gave me an opportunity. And now I'm on a complete different trajectory. And then in the middle of your career, you have less of that. But then when you are more senior in your career, organizations are like, look, we're going through transformation. We're trying to accomplish something new. This is a trusted leader in our organization. and they've got, they've got great skill set. Can we move them into another department or a different project and see if they can accomplish something that we haven't been able to get accomplished before? And so there's these cross-departmental opportunities. Sometimes they're lateral, sometimes they are a promotion. But as an individual who is successful in their career, it can be scary to say, oh no, I know I've been successful. I know I've been able to hit my bonus over and over again, but now you're going to ask me to do something I've never done before. It's a great opportunity, but should I do it? And so there's this sense of risk, both on the individual and on the company. But that's often when we think about people that are really going to the top of their career, they've had cross-departmental experience. They've had cross-departmental wins. They've learned things outside of their wheelhouse. And so to empower somebody to in advance predict, is this going to be a smart move for me? It comes down to forget about the tasks. Are you going to be using those behaviors that are your, superpowers where you naturally outperform your peers? Are those going to be the things you're doing on a daily basis or not? Because that'll tell you whether or not that move into maybe an uncomfortable zone is going to be a win and something that helps you catapult your career to the next level, or is it going to be setting you up for failure? And being able to have that kind of diagnostic tool in advance. And then same thing, to advocate, being like, hey, I know this transformation project is happening. I'm your person. Don't bring somebody outside the organization that knows nothing about the company. I can do this. And if you have confidence going in and pitching yourself and you can explain why you're the perfect fit, you're now going to have that opportunity you wouldn't have had before.
Caitlin, this is, as you're speaking, I'm thinking about three things. First, I'm thinking about superpower. We all have amazing superpower and we just need to recognize those. And, I think the other things you just said is the superpowers we had when we were 20 may not be the one we have when we are 50. And we are all realizing that as well, as we are maturing, our careers changing, and what we are passionate about is also evolving. And that has been the case for myself, Lisa, and Jess. We are constant learners, and we want to deliver value for our industry and the people who surround us. And we realize there is a gap around authentic identity just happening. But the last point, actually, I think I liked around what you are saying is we can reinvent ourselves, and it's okay to reinvent ourselves. And we are just not one-faced cookie. And what you're offering is allowing us to actually take the time. And today, right now, is the right time. It's December, going into January. It's all about planning. It's the right time to do a Plum profile.
So I just want to kind of round out what Sabine said and reflect. And I love that, Sabine, that it's an evolution. I think sometimes people need permission. And I think one of the things that makes them nervous about doing any kind of assessment, like a personality test or a communication style, is that they're going to get diagnosed and locked in and attached to some sort of label. It's almost like getting diagnosed with an illness. You're like, you're this, you're that. But whereas I think that the Plum approach and the approach we're trying to take is a more holistic one. And this is just information. Information is power. If you know your innate gifts, if you know your tendencies and you lean into them and you own them, they all become strengths. Even the things that look like blind spots can really be superpowers and be secret powers once you understand that that's who you are. And I love too, Sabine, that you mentioned changing and evolving, not just as we age, but I think as we have experience. We've worked across different industries, different size companies at different stages. All of that informs your viewpoint, and to be in flux and to be in change is actually the only place to be. It's the only constant is change. So I think it's really important that you've developed a modality that works with that instead of trying to fight the natural order of things.
Yeah, and I was just gonna say, first of all, I think often we inhibit ourselves from those natural metamorphoses that we go through in our career, and those kind of like butterfly moments. I'm actually thinking of all the people that we admire, and none of them have stayed constant throughout time, but probably their behavioral drivers and depleters have always been there, right? Like that's the underlying part of the industrial psychology of this, Caitlin, and I love that. And then, of course, for me, it was really reflective to go through the Plum profile and to think, yeah, the things that people think that I would be good at were probably where I had developed really good compensatory skills, Caitlin, but they are still drainers. And so you have to think about burnout and where you consume your energy. I feel like a lot of times I spend my day, I'll go back to my tennis analogy, volleying. No wonder why I'm drained, right? So to me, when I get pulled into the volley, that's where my battery on my Plum, profile is really, it's a drainer for me. I'm a natural like ace server. And so when I spend all my days and all my weeks in the volley, no wonder why I'm like questioning, am I really good at this? Should I be doing this? What's wrong? And I think a lot of times as we're discovering our voice and connecting to our authentic identity and then connecting to that self-advocation that you talked about, Caitlin, like, hey, I'm the person for this. We need to make sure that we're not advocating for it because it's just the next rung up. We need to be advocating for it because it's the part of you that puts you in your best optimized way. Now, that's not to say you don't do things that develop, your ability to charge and hold power longer, right? But I think that a lot of times we get drawn into trying to maximize those depleters. And I would say that wherever you are in your career journey, it's really hard to continually replenish yourself with electrolytes if you don't have something that's recharging your battery. So over to you, Sabine. There's a distinct reason why we wanted to have Plum on this call today and could not be more excited about this next segment.
Yeah, it's about moving into partnership and innovation. And Lisa, Jess, and I are absolutely excited to have completing, reviewing our Plum profile and learning about each one of us a little bit better as partners, as women in tech, as women wanting to build authentic identities for our colleagues out there. And so we are going to spend some time during Christmas around reflection and also managing expectation. But yeah, really excited to be leveraging Plum for our authentic identity programming, our masterminds that we are putting together. But Caitlin, question I have for you is, what are you most excited about? What are we going to discover? Is our audience going to be discovering as they go and build their Plum profile?
I am so excited to be partnering with you and being part of this incredible initiative. I think that it fills a really big need in the industry, and this is really exciting. So thank you for partnering, and thank you for allowing us to be part of your journey. I think the biggest thing that people are going to, the more they dive in and realize, is that when you are early in your career, especially women, a lot of us were driven to please others. We were top performers because we wanted to demonstrate excellence to others, but it was always on somebody else's terms. What is it that defined success was fulfilling requests from somebody more senior. And as we get older in our career, there's actually this power dynamic that changes where, success and performance isn't because we're pleasing somebody above us and doing what we're told and just trying to accomplish lots of things and work, 10% or 50% harder than the people around us and demonstrating our worth that way. It becomes this point where, really being at your top A game and really, excelling the most in your career is because you are showing up as your authentic self. You are really understanding what it is that you can deliver and that where you can excel, and you start setting up yourself for success in that environment rather than just being in a position where you're constantly depleted because you're trying to outperform based on effort. It's the age of working smarter, not harder. And Plum is really that ability to start to rethink, how are you spending the majority of your time? How are you positioning yourself? How are you talking about yourself? This is the data that when you put this with, authentic identity, you can really start to have that skill set to market yourself, position yourself, speak about yourself differently. And it does make people realize, why am I doing these things that are draining me and leading me to burnout? They're not serving me anymore. They may have served me early in my career to get ahead of the pack, but now as I'm more senior in my career, this isn't serving me any longer. So the excitement is being able to start the new year with putting down those things, just letting go of those things that aren't serving us and are draining us, and being empowered to show up and say, this is where I'm going to deliver the biggest ROI for the company. Put me in coach for these type of activities because I'm going to do a better job than all of my peers, and let me spend my time on those things.
I love that, Caitlin. And I in particularly love the emphasis on the power dynamic shift. And it's so important because I think it's like a radio, and I'm being a little old school. It's like a radio being out of tune, right? It's like we don't actually understand why it's out of tune. It's just this background noise that it's like sometimes we notice it and sometimes we don't. And I think that the point is, a lot of times we don't understand that a drainer can be one subcontext. There can be one subtle thing that drains you in something that is actually your driver. And you were giving this example earlier, Caitlin, when we were talking that you're not understanding why you can go from this high to low so quickly. And what I found so reflective about tooling, and I don't say tooling lightly because usually I'm like, yeah, whatever. Tooling is like hype or whatever. But when you get and you combine the things that we've talked about with the profile and the democratization and the industrial psychology, it is so spot on that you're like, oh my gosh, of these 10, full charge batteries, there's this one drainer in here. And if I happen to be doing that one drainer, it can erode all these other things. I think the power of that, as you activate your identity, as you lean into owning, like we call it like owning your own pen, Caitlin, like owning your own narrative, owning your own voice, I think is so important. And of course, that's why we're partnering with you. That's why we're launching Activate Your Authentic Identity. We're doing it so that people can invert the power shift of bringing credibility to a brand versus the brand credentializing you. And I think that's a huge power dynamic that we're experiencing in society at large. And yeah, for me, that's so exciting to continue to usher that in. Would love to hear what you think about that as well, Jess.
So I love when you talk about the power shift between, we used to let the logo define us. Now we're the ones defining and credentializing. But I also liked when you said about taking the power of your own positioning and your own story, because we touched on this in our last chat, which is, if you don't have intentionality behind what you're doing and what you're projecting, then you are still projecting an intention. It just might not be yours. It might be your bosses, it might be your colleagues, it might be your clients, but someone's intention is getting out there. And if you're not consciously, putting forth the effort to move forward what you think, what you believe, your point of view, you're just doing it on behalf of someone else by proxy. And it's a really disempowered place to work from. And it's kind of a default that people fall into when they take a job or they sign a contract or they join an organization. And it is changing. But to do that on purpose and with conviction is super, super important. This is such a great tool to empower people to take that power back.
Kathleen, thank you so much for joining us. I heard from my colleague Lisa and Jess that at the end of the day, today, it's all about alignment. And you know what? I love stats. So I went to find a few stats just to reinforce the message. Psychometric assessment can quantify talents such as persuasion, leadership, and execution with more than 4 times more prediction than on-the-job success or resumes, actually. Research highlights that over 70% of performance can be predicted by using the right psychometric tool. Talent metrics such as talent and leadership potential evaluators, and I would call them evaluators because we have gone through your platform and I thought there are amazing evaluators to actually own into what we are good at. But those create behavioral and psychometric data that allows us to be unique forever. They are valuable when looking at the human impact. And today is all about humanizing things, actually, Kathleen. So we are humanizing. And then by incorporating psychometric testing into talent acquisition and growth processes, leading corporation, startup founders can significantly reduce the time spent on screening and interviewing and suitable candidates. We have a problem today, which is we are looking for talent. There's a talent war, and we want to find the right people for our teams. Anything else, Lisa and Jess?
I just love that it's 4 women on the call today, innovating, changing things, moving it forward. I just really enjoy that. That's all I have to say.
And yeah, no, I want to just say that this is full circle moment for me. I met Caitlin, you know, I always say, appreciate the patterns and the connections that you make. I met Caitlin around 5 years ago backstage at an Elevate Tech conference by one of our like co-colleagues. It's like, you two need to know each other. And in those moments, you know, you need to know each other, but they stay with you. And I could not be more grateful to see what Caitlin is democratizing for society at large and for everything that we're talking about. But I am profusely thankful that Plum is willing to partner with Authentic Identity, empowering Authentic Identity, and really showing up to say that we have to go beyond what was traditional. We have to empower people to find their voice, their drivers, their drainers in a way that's backed by data and science. And so Caitlin, I just wanted to say thank you from the bottom of my heart. We couldn't be more excited to be ushering into 2024 powered by I'll call the charge of plum.io. And so with that, thank you so much, Caitlin.
Thank you so much. This really was energizing for me. You've made my day. I hope you all have an amazing holiday season and take the time to reflect on your Plum profiles. And I can't wait to see what we accomplish next year. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathleen. Let's democratize. Let's industrialize.